Let's now just take a moment to become centered as we enter into our time of meditation together. Just beginning to become aware of this present moment. Knowing that yesterday is past, tomorrow still left to be written. There is only right here, right now. And I invite you to begin to focus your attention on your body. Beginning to just sit in the stillness and to notice any tension that may arise or they may be felt somewhere within the body. Now I ask you to visualize that tension moving up and out of the body, up into the sky, and evaporating as it touches the sun. Now begin to bring your awareness to your heart space, your heart chakra. This beautiful space where only love and light can exist. And as you continue to focus within that heart space, it shines brightly, growing, expanding, and filling your entire body with the most beautiful love and light imaginable. Continuing to expand, it begins to move from your own body to the people sitting to your left and to your right, those in front of and behind you, also encasing them in this wondrous love and light. Expanding still, it begins to cover everyone in the room, moving and growing until it moves beyond this building, touching and encircling everyone in its path. And as we begin to move into the silence, I invite you to feel this love and this light together feeling its high vibration, and knowing that we truly are one in the silence. And as you begin to bring your attention back to this room and back to this moment, know that you take this love and this light with you wherever you go. Know that you radiate it out to those around you. Know that you are a beacon to that love and that light. There is only light, and there is only love. All right, and let's give Rachel and Pete another hand. Such talent. Yes. It's hard to imagine how this building can contain so much talent. That's what impressed me. One of the things that impressed me most about this congregation. So, is everybody ready? Today is the first day of our book study, and I'm excited about this. We are going to be discussing for the next several weeks Parker J. Palmer's Healing the Heart of Democracy. And we're going to be talking about the courage to create a politics worthy of the human spirit. And I'm ready for this, so I hope everybody's excited as I am. Now, when we talk about politics, the politics of our government may come to mind. I think that's probably what a lot of people think about when you hear the word politics. So what's going on and where and these local and national governments. But I want for us to go even further than that as we go through this study. As we move through this book, I invite you to approach this from a metaphysical perspective. And I'll give you an example as to what I mean by that. Now, when I took my first metaphysics class in ministerial school, I struggled a bit. I'll admit, unity metaphysics, here I am, wanting to be a unity minister, and I was struggling a little. My instructor, and I love you, Reverend Carol Lundy, if you're listening, we got into a couple of spats about this because she'd give me an assignment, and I'd read the book, and I would think I had it all down. I was like, man, I am a metaphysics pro. I got this down. And we used a book that you're probably familiar with if you've had a unity metaphysics class, and I'm sure Barry's probably used it before, but it's with Reverend Paul Hasselbeck, if I can say it correctly, Heart-Centered Metaphysics. So I'd get the assignments, and I would look everything up in that book, and I'd hand it back to Reverend Carol. She'd hand me back my work and say, okay, great. You've quoted the book, but you still haven't metaphysically interpreted what I asked you to metaphysically interpret. So I would be starting to get really irritated. I'd pull out my books, The Revealing Word and my metaphysical dictionary, I'd be like, no, see, this is what it says in the book. I'm doing this correctly. And she'd say, no, I don't care what the metaphysical interpretation is to Reverend Paul Hasselbeck or to Charles Fillmore. I want to know what it is to you. So finally the light bulb goes off. She was trying to tell me to metaphysically interpret something to what it meant for me. To sit with it in prayer and to sit with it in meditation and to find out what it means to me in that moment. And she wanted me to explain those things. Well, what do they mean to you, Reverend Evin? And she wanted me to explain that back to her. She wanted me to sit with Spirit, God, the universe, whatever name you have for it, and to go within with that and to see what it was saying to me. So I'll tell you that my metaphysical studies got so much easier then. Because I'm like, hey, there's no right or wrong answer. It's what it means to me. And it also allowed me to become more open and receptive to whatever spirit put there for me without any kind of condemnation or judgment on myself. And that's also what I invite you to do as we go through this study. Maybe with your groups, your study groups if you're studying with one, maybe individually, but just sit with it. Pray on it, meditate with it, and just find out what it means to you. And feel free to use Reverend Paul Hasselbeck's book and go to Charles Fillmore. Those tools are there to help you. They're there for a reason. They're going to offer you a great deal of help as we go through this, but also don't forget to rely on yourself. Always remember to go inside and listen to that still small voice on what Spirit is saying to you. Now, I also really invite you, and I know sometimes it's difficult, but I invite you to not approach the world of politics as a them versus us thing. Because we know that there really is no us or them. There's only us. And when we approach things from that perspective, things can begin to shift. Our perception can begin to shift a little bit when we do that. And when we do that, we also begin to shine some much needed light on that bridge that brings us closer together. Sometimes closing up that gap a little bit that seems to separate us so much, allowing us to at least be able to meet somewhere in the middle. Now, in 2011, this is probably going to show you how much of a geek I am, but singer and songwriter Pink released a song called Bridge of Light. And in that, some of the lyrics stated, "When your feet are made of stone, you're convinced that you're all alone. Look at the stars instead of the dark. You'll find your heart shines like the sun. Let's not let our anger get us lost. In the need to be right, come at way too high a cost. That's when love can build a bridge of light. That's what turns the wrongs all right. That's when you know it's worth the fight. That's when love turns nighttime into day. That's when loneliness goes away. That's why you got to be strong tonight, because only love can build us a bridge of light." Deep breath, take it on the chin, but don't forget to let love back in. That's when love can build a bridge of light. But then the question becomes how? How can we begin to build those bridges of light? Page 14 of the book starts to break down everything as bullet points and kind of starts to summarize it a little bit. So I'm going to go through some of those today as we move through reading the prelude and then chapter 1. But the first step I want to talk about on page 14 is to listen to each other openly and without fear. Now, it is fact that we are never going to agree with another person 100% of the time. It is just likely to never happen. But that's okay. We don't have to. It is not a requirement to take this human journey that we agree with each other 100% of the time. Not even here in Unity is that required, that we agree with each other 100% of the time. One of my mother's favorite sayings while I was growing up is, "Our differences is what makes the world go around." And it's true, because imagine if we were all the same all the time. If I looked out there and everybody's got on purple, or everybody's got red, or everybody likes to eat lasagna. Olive Garden would probably have a major mass rush after church, right? There wouldn't be enough lasagna for everybody. And I mean, what would happen if everybody in this country were all Packers fans? Yeah. I went there. But where would the fun be in that? Who would the Packers fans yell at today if the Dallas Cowboys didn't exist? But what if instead of just yelling at those Cowboys fans and telling them how wrong they are, what if we were just maybe stop and ask why they're a Cowboys fan? It doesn't mean you're going to become a Cowboys fan just simply by listening to one, but it may make you understand a bit more on why someone is a Cowboys fan. Maybe it's to honor a beloved father who was a Cowboys fan that's made his transition. Or maybe it's because someone, and this is how my wife chooses teams. She's going to kill me for saying this, but maybe it's because someone likes the color of the jersey. But really, it could be any number of reasons. But unless we're willing to sit and hold those conversations with each other without any fear or judgment, we will likely never know the answer to some of those questions. So step 2, also on page 14 of our book, states, to hold what we believe and know with conviction and be willing to listen openly to other viewpoints, changing our mind if needed. Now, if you were here last week, you heard my talk on change and about how our co-founder Charles Fillmore once stated, I reserve the right to change my mind. Now, I think sometimes we fear hearing other viewpoints because sometimes we find that those other viewpoints challenge everything that we believe or maybe have believed up to that point. Perhaps it's even a belief we've carried with us all of our lives or for many years. And I've been through it myself. I grew up Baptist, and in those teachings, I was taught that God was some external being. God was a he was a guy up there in the sky somewhere. And while there were a lot of beliefs and ideals in those teachings that I didn't agree with, I admittedly kind of latched on to the notion that God was some dude in the sky up there somewhere. And it actually admittedly brought me a little bit of comfort because A, it seemed like there was always somebody out there watching over me, no matter where I went or what I did. And B, there was always somebody out there that I could blame if things didn't go the way that I was wanting them to go. I mean, why not blame an invisible deity in the sky? It sounded like a great idea. Still kind of does sometimes, but yeah. But then I began to study spirituality and other various teachings outside of that traditional church. And it was frightening at first. And I would be somewhat resistant lots of times when I would hear some of those teachings initially. And I remember one of the first times that I saw something mentioning that God was something other than some man in the sky. I was probably around 14 years old or so, and my mother had taken me to the dentist, and we were in the dentist office, and I began looking through some of the magazines there on the table in the waiting room, and I came across a Life magazine. Now, thumbing through it, I pick it up, and I open it up to an article, and it's talking about this God energy and how it's found within. And I'm thinking, oh no. Looking around, oh gosh, I hope God is not watching that I'm reading this article because this is blasphemous. So me and my 14-year-old mind, I slammed that magazine shut and put it back on the table, and I was like, I'm never picking up another Life magazine. That's gonna doom me right there. But looking back now, I kind of laugh at how naive young Evin really was. I realized later on in my life that I slammed down that magazine because it challenged everything I believed and everything that I had been taught. It basically taught me that what I believed up until my 14 years to that point was quite possibly not how it really was at all. And that was a very frightening thing to me at the time. But back to the book. Our minds or beliefs may or may not change as we listen to others. We can hold steadfast in whatever it is we believe, whether it's about religion, spirituality, politics, our favorite color, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean, though, that we can't listen to another person whose viewpoints differ than our own. Knowing that we have the right to change our minds at any time we want, or not, it doesn't matter. Step 3, which is also on page 14 of our book, mentions to probe, question, explore, and engage in dialogue, developing a fuller, more three-dimensional view of reality in the process. I don't know about you, the rest of you in this room, but I find it extremely difficult to understand where another person is coming from unless I'm willing to enter into dialogue with those whose opinions and beliefs differ from my own. And before we go any further with this one, I do want to mention one thing. That open dialogue is necessary on both sides of the table. Taking abuse from another person is not. Should you ever find yourself in that situation, it is okay to get up and to excuse yourself. And in fact, you should get up and excuse yourself because it goes both ways. Both sides must be willing and open to question and to explore. And I'm not just talking about politics or religion here. I'm talking about anyone whose beliefs or opinions differ from your own. Now, we probably all are on social media in some point or the other, whether you got a Facebook account or not. You probably at least are on the internet at some point or watching the news. And you've probably seen arguments plastered all over the place. I know I have. It's a daily occurrence when I boot up the computer. You'll see name calling, the whole you're right and I'm wrong arguments. And I've even seen people threaten each other. Hey, I see where you work. I'm going to come up there and I'm going to give you a true what for because you believe different than I do. But remember in step 1 where we talked about we'll likely never know why another person believes the way they do unless we're willing to sit down and not name call, not threaten, not I'm right, you're wrong, but hold civilized conversations. Now at Unity on Greenville, my Dallas church, my minister there, Reverend Karen Romstan, she once held this series of talks where we would have people from various groups come into the church. And we were invited to attend these talks and to have open dialogue and ask each other questions in a safe environment. These groups were, occasionally there would be more religious groups like we had Jews and Muslims, but there would also be groups from the LGBT community and just various groups that people might have been curious about, offering people, again, the chance to understand and learn from each other in this safe environment that my minister had created. Now, during their visit with us, the Muslims asked if they could host one of their iftar meals with us one evening. And for those of you who don't know what the iftar meal is, these are meals consumed during the Muslim Ramadan. And Ramadan is the 9th month in the Islamic calendar, and during that month, the observers of Islam, they fast from sunrise to sunset. And during that month, there is no food or drink consumed, and their thoughts must be kept as pure as possible. Because followers of Islam believe that fasting teaches patience, modesty, and offers growth in their spirituality. Meals served after sunset are called iftar, and they're eaten with family or shared with local communities. What a wonderful treat this was. Mindy, my wife, and I went, and we found the room packed. There was like hardly any seating room left at the tables, and the food was amazing. But it was a beautiful thing to be able to look out and to see everybody just laughing and talking and having a great time, just eating with each other and just enjoying a meal. And in that moment, we truly were all one, and you could just feel the oneness in the room. We were all just these spiritual beings on this human journey together. And it didn't matter whether you had on a headdress or not, your clothing, the color of your skin, your religion, your spiritual beliefs. We were all just one. But one of the biggest takeaways for me was the questions that I was able to ask. Some of those burning questions that I had about Islam. I was able to ask those in a safe environment. and to just learn from another person. For instance, I met just a woman from Ohio who had gone to study in Turkey and had converted to Islam. So it was so neat in that moment just to be able to hear about her journey with that. And it was something that I took with me. But in the end, when we left that evening, we realized that we just really weren't so different after all. And we all have those burning questions, all of us do, on those subjects where people's opinions and ideals and beliefs differ from our own. And that's great. Having those questions and those curiosities, that's the first step to really having an open mind and a willingness to learn. A willingness and an open mind to engage in that dialogue. Only then can we really begin to grasp the entire picture of those things that we may perceive as different or unknown to ourselves. So the last thing I want to discuss today is found on page 15 of our book. To feel more at home on the face of the earth amid differences of many sorts and better able to enjoy the fruits of diversity. So let me ask this question. How would the world be if the only fruit we were able to grow on this earth was apples? It would be boring. I enjoy a great apple every now and then, but I also sometimes am in the mood for a banana or a pear or an apple. Each one offers something exciting to our taste buds, and each one offers different nutritional qualities. So in his book, Mr. Palmer talks about diversity, and he mentions race, ethnicity, and social class, a lot of those things that probably first come to mind when we think about diversity. But he also takes it a step further when he mentions equally important or the wildly different lenses through which we see, think, and believe. Now, Mr. Palmer tells us about how when faced with diversity, we can sometimes, even if just on a subconscious level, begin to feel tension. We feel that because it forces us to wake up to the fact that there are differences, and we may not always understand those differences. And let's face it, most of us, even again, if only subconsciously, we feel most comfortable being around people who are the same. Some of you may have come from traditional churches because you didn't necessarily agree with the teachings at those traditional churches. So you walk into Unity and you find a group of people who, at least for the most part, probably believe the same. And there's comfort in that. And it's not only with church and spirituality. Most of us feel most comfortable with like people. Again, sometimes it's not conscious, but we do. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it's again having the willingness to realize that we aren't all exactly the same. And that is perfectly okay, as long as you've got the willingness to learn from someone who differs than you. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's highly doubtful that any of us in this room are always going to see everything exactly the same. And although there are many reasons for this, one of this is highly dependent on the life experiences that we've had, right? Where we grew up, our families of origin, the friends we've had, and just the different experiences that we've had along the way and along the journey of this lifetime. But it's a willingness to learn about those different experiences and a willingness to hear one another's stories and to do that with, as Mr. Palmer states, with respect, patience, openness, and hope. That is how we begin to relieve any of those tensions that we feel that are caused by diversity. That is also how we begin to create a politics from the heart, one worthy of the human spirit. Our light shines just a little bit brighter each and every time we're willing to listen to another person with that willingness and that open mind and with a true curiosity about the journey of another person. Each time the light shines a little bit brighter, we begin to illuminate another step on that bridge. That bridge that closes the gap between those things that we may fear or those differences that lie between us. Romans 15:7 of the Bible states, "Therefore welcome one another as the Christ has welcomed you." As Pink mentioned in her song, that is when we begin to build a bridge of light. Namaste.